Go. Vertical bandsaw 101. So this machine, like a few others that we talked about, the drill press as well, you need to have instructor approval before you actually start the operation. We're going to go through some basics and how this thing works, but if you're going to cut something on this, we would expect that you check with us prior, make sure that your setup and everything is okay. First of all, some how it works on this thing. There's two wheels on this, an idler wheel on top and a drive wheel on bottom. There's an electric motor that drives this long 12-foot bandsaw blade around here. This idler wheel can tip in and out, and it controls where the bandsaw blade rides on here. And there's a bearing or a guide bearing on the back side here that'll actually take, when you push on the blade this way, when you're loading it to cut, it takes that load, and there's a bearing that spins back there. That stuff's all kind of behind the scenes. We take care of making sure the blade is centered and it's working. The blade in this case is just about at the end of its life. It's cut a lot of metal and it's pretty tired, so we'll need to change it out pretty soon. What you can adjust is the blade guide height. This will slide up and down. I have to loosen this set screw by turning it counterclockwise, and I can raise this up, and it has a cutting depth that it can cut through of up to about 8 inches. You wouldn't want this tall because the blade can flex back and forth if I was cutting this plate material. So we want to bring this down to within about 1/4 inch of the work surface, those two guides right there, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten the knob back up on the top. Okay, so that's locked in. The most practical and common stuff that we cut is plate steel. This is a piece of 3/16 inch plate steel. It was sheared on the edges. We got it from Midway. We can use the plasma cutter, which is another process, and normally if it's not a critical cut or has to be a clean cut, I would say do that. But you can see that the plasma doesn't do that good of a job keeping it straight if you don't use a straight edge or you don't know what you're doing with the plasma cutter. So let's say we just wanted to notch a corner out of this piece, okay? A 1 inch by 1 inch corner. It was going to fit into a square tubing corner. We can use our metal scribe, similar to what we've used in Class B4 for sheet metal, and we can scribe out a couple lines. There's our 1 inch corner. We want to highlight start and stop points. We'll do that as well. Okay, basics of operating this piece of equipment. There is a fence which you could set. If I wanted to set that at 1 inch, I could set the fence at 1 inch, slide this all the way over, lock it in. There's also a miter gauge, and the miter gauge allows you to do angled cuts. So if we loosen this, we can set this at any given angle. And if we knew we wanted to cut a 30-degree angle off of here, we could do that. We can also freehand cut, which is just guiding, watching the blade cut through the material. Okay, a few things that are up here that are critical safety rules. Number one, when you're cutting with this, you never want to put your hands in line with the blade. So that means if we look from back here, if I'm pushing on this, I don't ever want to push so that my thumbs would be in line, so if they slipped, I would lose a thumb. I would want to keep them on either side of the blade and keep pressure on either side of my material, but never push directly into the blade. Second thing is wear hearing protection, especially when you're cutting plate stock. This amplifies off the table. It's extremely loud. It's loud for everybody else in the shop too, but wear some good hearing protection. We have these. We do have the foam types, but these are definitely way more decibel reducing. And the last thing is get our permission if you're going to cut anything on this so we can see your setup, especially round stock. There's a danger in cutting round or cylindrical stock. If you're trying to cut round tubing, the blade can actually try and spin it and rotate it in your hand, twist you up in it, bad deal. Okay. So other than that, our blade guide is set to the right height. I'm going to line up my marks here. Start the saw up, let it come up to speed. Okay, it's at full speed now. And I'm going to work in until I find that starting point. The kerf of the blade is the width of the blade, so I'm going to go a little bit to the outside, this side. Okay. let the machine come to a stop. Take your horsetail brush, brush away the chips and material. This goes in the scrap bin unless it's a piece that you're keeping. And once your tabletop's cleared off, you're pretty much done.